All right, everybody. This week it's the entire books of Leviticus and Numbers, so this should be quick. I want to give you a top-down view because these larger books full of legal traditions, they can be hard to navigate. So I've broken down what happens where, just so you have it as kind of a reference guide. There's not a lot of stuff that we're really going to sit down and read about. Not a whole lot anyway. But the basic idea behind Leviticus is it's for the Levites, it's for the priests to know. So chapters 1 to 7 of Leviticus are all about sacrifices that can be offered at the altar. What kind of animals you can sacrifice, how the sacrifices are done, what they're for. Usually they are sacrifices to, there are different phases of life, like X number of days after you give birth, or X number of days after you touch a dead body. That'll come up again later. Chapters 8 to 10 of Leviticus are the tabernacle specs, the components, the furnishings, and the priestly vestments. So if you want to have a good time, you can dig around in there and find out the recipe for the incense that the priests used. 11 to 15 are the cleanliness laws. Now these are really interesting because it talks about it's cleanliness, but it's ritual cleanliness. So here's the thing. Things that make you unclean are touching dead bodies, touching bodily juices, and eating owls and stuff like that. But it's important to know that becoming unclean doesn't necessarily mean that you're sinful. Those ideas are not connected. So in our modern time, we'll use like clean or unclean to mean like worldly and holy. And the idea is really that to be unclean is not to be sinful. It just means that you have to take time and do certain things before you can interact with all the special, sacred, separate stuff in the tabernacle. Everything here is about the tabernacle. The tabernacle and the priestly authority to work there and the stuff that happens there is the heart of Leviticus. So you have the cleanliness laws, how to stay clean, what happens when you're not. Chapter 16 is the Day of Atonement. This is the biggest ritual. This is the most important sacrifice in the calendar. It's the biggest deal. So there's all kinds of rules about what the priest does and what kind of animal he sacrifices. And they put the sin into a goat. It's where the term scapegoat supposedly comes from. And they run that goat with all the people's sins off into the wilderness. And then 17 to 26, you have the holiness codes. Now, that's a super section, so it's like it gets more granular than that. You'll notice that's kind of a huge chunk. So 23 to 25 are about the feasts and festivals you're supposed to have during the year, and 26 features the blessings and curses associated with the law. So you'll remember last time we talked, we were looking at Hittite suzerainty treaties, and how when you make a landlord covenant, a landlord treaty, under some ancient Near Eastern law systems, one of the features, after you have rules about how to memorialize the covenant and what kind of feasts and festivals are used to commemorate the contract, the landlord covenant. And then at the end there will be a list of blessings and curses. Blessings for obedience to the contract and curses for breaking the rules. So that's what's going on in Leviticus. Real quick, this is just again an overview of Numbers. Numbers, in Hebrew it's called Bamidbar, in the desert or in the wilderness. So Numbers comes right up on the heels of Leviticus. When we left out of Exodus, Moses, things have gone so bad at the foot of Mount Sinai that Moses isn't allowed to enter the tabernacle. And that's kind of where we start. The Lord calls to Moses from the tabernacle. He has to go to him. And then, he gets all these laws and rules at the tabernacle. And then right on that comes Numbers. Now, Numbers is much more narrative driven. This is the story of Israel in the wilderness. So, chapters 1 to 9, our last business at Sinai, and they have another Passover. It's the second Passover, but it's the first Passover in the wilderness, so it details that. And then 10 to 21 are the transit to Moab. Here's the thing. The story goes, like you can even learn this much of the Israel in the wilderness story from watching the Rugrats Hanukkah special. They wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Well, that 40 years takes place from Exodus 19 through Leviticus and Numbers. By the end of Numbers, they're at Moab. They're knocking on the door of Canaan, of the Promised Land. So, they, 10 to 21, they spend this time moving to Moab. Chapter 11, there's a general rebellion. Everybody doesn't want to be here. They're hungry. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Chapter 12, Aaron and Miriam. These are Moses' brother and sister. They also rebel, and it doesn't go great. 13 to 19 is that section where they send a bunch of spies. So they actually get to Moab, like right here. And they send a bunch of spies into the land, into Canaan, to see what's going on there. And the spies come back and they're like, oh, they're giants. They're going to kill us. We should go back to Egypt and be slaves again. That was better than this. We don't want to be hanging out here. Except for 2 spies, Caleb and I think Joshua, are pretty confident that with the Lord's help they can take these guys. So those guys are blessed. At that point, the Lord says, okay, you know what? You can't go in for 40 years. So then they kind of go around a little more. Chapter 20, there's another one of these incidents where Moses has to hit a rock with his staff and pull water out of it. But this is actually the time. So Numbers 20, this is the time where Moses says, do I have to do everything for you? And he gets in trouble for it. And according to the story, Moses is not allowed to enter into the promised land as a result of this event. So Moses having to beat a rock with the staff and get water out of it, that actually happens twice. There's 2 versions of that story, or 2 separate stories, different instances. This is the one that gets him in trouble and he can't go into the wilderness. He can't leave the wilderness and go into the promised land, so to speak. Okay, 21. Snakes! These are the fiery flying snakes. Everybody's getting bit by fiery flying snakes, and Moses has to carve a snake, and then if you look at the snake, you don't get snake poison to death. It's weird. It's a weird story. However, I will point out that fiery flying serpents, it's snakes. Well, one of the words used to describe these creatures is the same as the word used to describe the serpent in the Garden of Eden. No surprise there, right? One of the words used to describe these serpents is seraph. Seraph. There is a case to be made for the word seraph coming from a root of burning. When they're burning serpents, they're fiery flying serpents. I don't know. I'm not super compelled by the arguments, but here's the thing. The gist of this, the point of this is, the word that seraph used to describe these is the word used when Isaiah, in chapter 2, 3, when Isaiah sees the throne of God, and it's protected by 2 seraphim. The King James leaves it untranslated, seraphim, plural seraph. Probably because, King James and the translations they were pulling from didn't know what to make of more talking snakes in the storyline. But, they're referred to as seraphs. They're winged talking snakes. So this is kind of a foreshadowing. This is the first time they show up. Then the rest of Numbers is 22 to 36. It's all just adventures in Moab. And we're going to read my favorite one. So if we go to Numbers, what did I just say, 22? I'll read you this. This is my absolute favorite. Of all the narratives in Numbers, you got the flying snakes, you got the spies and the giants, and you got all this stuff. So, in 21, earlier in the narrative, they get in a battle with the Amorites, and they trash them. So in 22, they took possession of that country. The Israelites then marched on and encamped in the steppes of Moab across the Jordan from Jericho. Balak, son of Zippor, this is a local governor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, Moab was alarmed because the people were so numerous, and Moab dreaded the Israelites. Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now this horde will lick clean all that is about us, as an ox licks the grass of the field." So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor and Pethor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his kinsfolk, to invite him, saying, "There's a people that came out of Egypt, and it hides the earth from view, and is settled next to me. Come put a curse on them." So the king of Midian hires this wizard, he's not Israelite, he's like from somewhere else. And he says, "Hey, come curse these guys." So Balaam rolls out, and he's going to go out and try to curse them. And here we go. When he arose, so now we're in chapter 22, verse 21. When he arose in the morning, Balaam saddled his ass and departed with Moabite dignitaries. God was incensed at this going, so an angel of the Lord placed himself in his way as an adversary. Ha-Satan, the word Satan comes from, adversary. He was riding on his she-ass with his two servants alongside, and the ass caught sight of the angel of the Lord standing in the way with a drawn sword in hand. The ass swerved from the road and went into the fields, and Balaam beat the ass to turn it back into the road. The angel of the Lord then stationed himself in a lane between the vineyards with a fence on either side. And the ass, seeing the angel of the Lord, pressed himself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he beat it again. Once more the angel of the Lord moved and stationed himself on a spot so narrow that there was no room to swerve right or left. And when the ass now saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam, who was furious, and beat the ass with a stick. And the Lord opened the ass's mouth, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you beat me these 3 times?" Balaam said, Balaam is not fazed by this, says, "You made a mockery of me. If I had a sword, I'd kill you." And the ass said to Balaam, "Look, you've been riding me all along until this day. Have I ever been in the habit of doing weird stuff like this?" And he answered, "No." And the Lord uncovered Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, drawn sword in his hand. Thereupon he bowed right down to the ground. Literally, he prostrated himself to his nostrils. And the angel of the Lord says to him, "Why did you beat the ass 3 times? It is I who came out as an adversary." Satan. As an adversary, "for this errand is obnoxious to me. And when the ass saw me, she shied away from me those 3 times. And if she had not shied away from me, you're the one I would have killed, and I would have left her alive." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "Oh, I was wrong, because I didn't know you were standing there. If you disapprove, I'll turn back." But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Now, go with these guys, but you must do nothing except what I tell you." So Balaam went with Balak's dignitaries, and when they get there, instead of cursing Israel, he blesses them. It's really weird. Talking animal stories are great. You always like to come along with them. You always like to find them, when you're in there. So anyway, Balaam and the talking donkey, that goes down in 22. 23 kind of continues that narrative. 24, they do another census. And everything after that to 36 is battles, battles, battles. Let me show you a little thing here. Oh, geez. Oh, man. Okay, so I made a little map. I don't know if you can make any of this out. So wandering in the wilderness doesn't necessarily mean that we don't know what was going on. The text tells us all of the steps that were entailed in the journey. The question is, where are those places that were mentioned, and are some of them real? But here it is. They set out from somewhere up here in the delta of the Nile. Go down here. We think Sinai's around here somewhere. They come up here. They do a loop-de-loop while they send spies into the land. Then they go up around, get to Moab, and pretty soon they will cross the river into Jericho. And by that, when I say pretty soon, I mean it'll happen in Joshua. Because next week it's going to be all about Deuteronomy, and it's just going to be more crazy rules. Okay, so that's it, everybody. That's a short one for the week. Happy Mother's Day, and as we say in the hood, peace out.